There's another me watching me. Since I came back from death, I thought I was dead. But somehow, I was still here. I woke up in a sterile hospital room, feeling disoriented. The kind of disorientation that only comes from waking up with no recollection of how you got there. The soft, steady beeping of a heart monitor was the only thing that anchored me to reality. My body felt heavy, like I had been drugged or sedated. A dull pain throbbed in my head, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Where am I? What happened? The last thing I remembered was being in a car, speeding down an empty highway. I was alone, driving fast, eager to get to the coast before sunset. My mind had wandered, the road ahead stretching out in front of me like an endless ribbon of asphalt. And then I saw headlights in the distance, fast approaching. I had time to swerve, but not enough. The crash was inevitable. The next thing I knew, I was in this room. No recollection of how I got here. No memory of the accident. Nothing but the overwhelming feeling that something was terribly wrong. A nurse entered the room, her white uniform stark against the bright lights overhead. She had a kind smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're awake," she said in a soft voice. "How are you feeling?" "Where am I?" I croaked, my voice hoarse and dry. What happened? Her expression shifted ever so slightly, just enough for me to notice. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but something else, an odd caution. "You're in the hospital. You've been through a lot, but you're going to be okay." I wanted to ask her more, to demand answers, but my mind was foggy, too foggy to focus. Something was off. I could feel it in my gut. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, hoping to make sense of things. The screen lit up, and I noticed the date. March the 15th. I had been gone for at least a week, maybe longer. It didn't feel like that much time had passed. "How long have I been here?" I asked, staring at the nurse, hoping she would tell me what happened. "You've been unconscious for several days," she replied, "but you're doing much better now. You were in a car accident, but you're stable." I wanted to ask more, but something about her tone unsettled me. She was too calm, too controlled. It was as if she had rehearsed these words 1,000 times before. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from the story, something important. Suddenly, it hit me. The date, March 15th. I remembered the crash happening well over a week ago, maybe even 2 weeks. How could I have been unconscious for so long and not have any memory of it? The timeline didn't make sense. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness swept over me. I lay back against the pillow, groaning softly. My head felt like it was spinning, like I was drifting in and out of two realities. The nurse noticed my discomfort and placed a cool hand on my forehead. "You need to rest," she said gently. "We'll give you some time to recover. Just take it easy for now." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The room seemed too quiet, too still, and the air felt thick, as though something or someone was watching me. Before I could question her further, she left the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I was alone, but I wasn't alone. The sensation of being watched lingered, crawling across my skin. I glanced around the room nervously, but nothing was out of place. The only thing I could focus on was the soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. As the minutes passed, I tried to calm my racing thoughts. My mind wandered back to the crash, to the blinding headlights and the screech of tires on asphalt. But it wasn't just the accident that troubled me. It was the feeling that something else had happened while I was gone. Something I couldn't remember. something that was waiting for me now. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them again, the fog in my mind would have cleared. But when I opened my eyes, I was no longer alone. There, standing in the corner of the room, was a figure, a shadowy presence, tall and indistinct, watching me. I blinked, but the figure didn't move. It was as if it was waiting for me to acknowledge it, waiting for me to understand. I tried to sit up, my breath catching in my throat, but the figure was gone as soon as I made a move. My heart hammered in my chest, my breath shallow. Had I imagined it? Was it just a trick of my mind? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that something had come back with me. Was I truly alive? Or had I come back from something far worse than death? I couldn't remember anything, yet I could never forget what I felt in that place. The days that followed my awakening felt like a blur. I was told I had been in a coma for several days, though it didn't feel like that. Time had become distorted in my mind. Every morning felt like I was waking up for the first time, and every night the unease returned, sharp, jarring, as if I was about to fall into a deep, dark pit. I tried to recall the events leading up to the crash, but my memories were fragmented, broken pieces scattered on the floor of my mind. I could remember the car, the road, the eerie quiet of the empty highway stretching out before me. I could remember the headlights blinding me in the distance, drawing closer with an inevitable force. But then, everything disappeared. I couldn't remember the crash itself, the moment when my life had been taken from me. I had to fill in the blanks to make sense of the chaos that lingered in my mind. Each night, as I lay awake in my hospital bed, I tried to piece together what happened. But every time I closed my eyes, I was met with darkness, followed by strange flashes of light. In one of these fleeting moments, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A hallway, a long dark corridor. The walls were covered in symbols I couldn't understand, and the air felt thick with an oppressive, suffocating force. I could hear whispers, but I couldn't make out the words. It was as if I was being pulled down that hallway, drawn forward by an invisible force. In another memory, I was outside. There was nothing but vast, open space. I stood in the middle of a field, the grass beneath my feet long and wild. The wind howled, and I could see something in the distance, something that I couldn't explain. An object, a structure, something that wasn't meant to be there. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't focus on it long enough to make sense of it. It slipped away as quickly as it appeared. Every time I tried to grasp these memories, they faded. Like smoke drifting through my fingers, they vanished the moment I thought I had them. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something wasn't right with my return. I decided to speak with my doctor, Dr. Harris, hoping for some answers. He was a quiet man, meticulous, with glasses that always seemed to sit slightly askew on his face. He had been the one to oversee my recovery, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something that made me question whether he knew more than he was letting on. "I'm having trouble remembering," I admitted to him, my voice low. "I feel like there's something important I'm missing, something that happened when I was out." Dr. Harris shifted in his seat, his eyes momentarily darting to the side. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but I noticed it. "It's normal to experience confusion after a traumatic event like this," he said, his voice calm and professional. "The brain often blocks out certain memories as a defense mechanism. It's your mind's way of protecting you from the trauma." But I knew it wasn't just that. Something had happened to me, something I couldn't explain. The way I felt when I was awake, the way I felt when I closed my eyes. It was different now. I wasn't the same person who had gotten into that car. Something had shifted inside me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I keep seeing things, I confessed. Strange images, places I've never been, people I don't recognize. It's like I don't know, drifting in and out of reality. Dr. Harris didn't react immediately. He just sat there, his fingers steepled in front of his face, as if contemplating his next words. Finally, he spoke. Some people experience vivid dreams or hallucinations after an experience like yours, he said, his voice gentle. It's possible that your mind is trying to process the trauma. You're likely just struggling with the aftermath. But I didn't believe him. It didn't feel like a mere hallucination. There was something more, something darker. I could feel it deep inside me, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. Something had happened to me while I was unconscious, something that went beyond mere trauma. I began to notice more inconsistencies as time went on. Little things, small details that I couldn't explain. The way people looked at me, the way they seemed to hesitate before speaking. Their words were careful, too measured, as though they were trying to avoid something. My family, especially my mother, seemed off, like they were hiding something from me. I could feel their eyes on me when they thought I wasn't paying attention, and I could hear the hushed whispers when I walked into a room. They were discussing me in ways that made me uncomfortable. They were scared, not just for my physical health, but for something else, something that had changed in me. It wasn't just the people around me, it was the way I felt too. The sense of being watched, of never being truly alone, the feeling that something was lingering just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again, the whispering. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but as the minutes passed, the voices grew louder, clearer. And then I heard it, my own name, Ethan. I sat up, my heart racing. My room was dark, but I could see shadows moving, flickering in the corners of my vision. I knew it wasn't just my imagination. Someone, or something, was in the room with me. I tried to stand, but my legs were weak, trembling beneath me. I reached for the light switch, but as my hand brushed against the wall, I heard the whisper again. Ethan, you're not alone. I spun around, but no one was there. The air was cold now, a chill that seeped into my bones. My pulse quickened as I looked around the room, half expecting to see something or someone standing in the shadows. But there was nothing, only silence. You've been chosen, Ethan, but not in the way you think. The days blurred together after that. I kept asking questions, but the answers always felt incomplete, as though I wasn't being told the whole story. People were acting strangely around me, especially my mother. Her behavior had grown more distant, colder, and whenever I tried to ask her about the time I had been missing, she would quickly change the subject, as if she feared something or someone was listening. It wasn't just my family that had changed. It was the way the world felt. Everything seemed a little off, a little too sharp or too muted. I would look at a person and feel like I didn't really know them, like they were strangers wearing familiar faces. Every interaction felt like it was happening in slow motion, as though I was drifting in and out of a dream, unable to fully engage with the world around me. One evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I needed to feel like myself again, to ground myself in the reality that felt so foreign. I left the house and walked down the quiet street, the cool night air brushing against my skin. It was a normal evening, but something about the stillness unsettled me. It felt like the calm before a storm, like something was about to happen, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. As I passed by a small cafe, I saw a figure standing near the corner of the street. It was a man, tall and dressed in a black suit, his back straight, his posture unnervingly rigid. He seemed out of place in the quiet, sleepy neighborhood, his presence almost unnatural. I couldn't explain why, but I felt drawn to him, as if some force was pulling me toward him. I stopped a few feet away from him, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his eyes on me. There was a coldness to him, an aura of detachment that sent a chill down my spine. "You've been chosen, Ethan," the man said, his voice low and calm, as though we were simply discussing the weather. But his words cut through me like a knife. "But not in the way you think." My mind raced. Who was this man? How did he know my name? And why did his words feel so final? "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, his head tilting as if he were contemplating something. The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows across his face. For a moment, I could have sworn that his eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, glowed faintly in the darkness. "You don't have to understand yet," he replied, "but you will. The answers are already there, Ethan. You just need to remember." I felt a jolt in my chest, like a bolt of electricity shot through me. "Remember what?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. My hands were trembling now, and I took a step back. What's happening? What did I see when I was gone? The man didn't move, but his expression softened just slightly. "You've seen things," he said, his voice still calm, but now laced with an unsettling undertone. "Things that were never meant to be seen. And now you're part of something bigger, something beyond your understanding." I could feel the blood drain from my face. His words made no sense, yet I felt like they were tapping into something deep inside me, something that had been buried since my return. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" The man's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm just a messenger, Ethan, a guide, but you've already begun your journey. And whether you're ready or not, the truth is coming for you." Before I could respond, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short gasps. I stood there for a moment, rooted to the spot, trying to process what had just happened. A guide, a messenger. What truth was he talking about? And why did I feel like I had just taken the first step into a world I wasn't prepared for? I tried to shake the feeling off as I walked back home, but it clung to me, lingering like a shadow. It was as if the man's words had awakened something in me, something I couldn't quite grasp. Later that night, I sat in bed replaying the conversation in my mind. The idea of being chosen felt absurd, but there was something about it that made my blood run cold. I kept thinking about the man's eyes, the way they had seemed to pierce through me, as if he knew everything there was to know about me. The whispers returned, the ones I had heard before. This time they were louder, more urgent, as if they were trying to break through my thoughts. "Ethan!" I turned my head, but the room was empty. The air was thick with tension, and my body felt as if it were vibrating with energy I couldn't explain. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere, but there was no one there. "You're not alone." I jolted upright in bed, my heart racing. The voice, it wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a presence, a force that I could feel in my very bones. and for the first time since I woke up, I realized that something was terribly wrong. I wasn't just being watched, I was being guided. But guided toward what? I kept thinking I was home, but the more I tried to settle, the more I felt like I wasn't in the right place. I don't know what I expected when I returned home. After days of hospital stays, endless tests and hushed conversations, I thought that returning to my apartment would somehow bring a sense of normalcy back to my life. But the moment I stepped through the door, I felt a deep, gnawing sense of wrongness. Like a piece of the puzzle was missing, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make the pieces fit. My apartment was the same, clean, familiar, nothing had changed, but everything felt distant, as if I was looking at it from the wrong angle, through a glass pane. The air was too still, too quiet. It wasn't the peace I had hoped for. It was an eerie silence that made every sound feel amplified, every movement feel magnified. I tried to make myself at home, unpacking a few of the things from the hospital bag my mum had brought. As I opened drawers and put things away, a sudden sharp noise startled me, a sound that came from the other room, a faint scraping sound. At first, I dismissed it as the old pipes or the house settling. But it happened again, and this time I was sure something or someone was moving through the apartment. I froze, my hand still holding a half-unpacked bag of clothes. The silence hung heavy in the air, and I felt it again, the feeling of being watched. Slowly, I turned towards the living room, my heart racing. Every instinct in me screamed that I shouldn't move. I didn't want to look, but I had no choice. I took a step forward, the floor creaking beneath my feet. Then I saw it, the reflection in the glass of the window. A figure, standing motionless, staring back at me. It was me, but it wasn't me, not in the way I knew myself. This figure, this thing, was darker somehow, its eyes hollow and black. And as I stood there paralyzed, the figure in the reflection smiled at me. The smile was wrong. It wasn't the kind of smile anyone could give. It was too wide, too stretched. It looked more like a grimace than anything that could be described as a smile. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt tight, as if I couldn't get any sound out. I backed away, stumbling over the coffee table, the glass of water I had been drinking spilling across the floor. But when I looked again, the figure was gone. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only my own reflection staring back at me. Was I imagining things? Had I really seen something? Or was it just the shock of waking up after everything that had happened? I couldn't be sure. But the feeling, the certainty that something was wrong with me, with this place, gripped me harder than ever before. I forced myself to calm down, to breathe. Maybe it was just a trick of the mind. I had been through so much already, and it wouldn't be the first time my mind played tricks on me. But the longer I stayed in the apartment, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just my mind that was out of sync. I was being pulled in two directions. There was the world I had come back to, the world where I was alive and seemingly well. And then there was the other world, the one I had experienced during my time away, the one where I had seen strange places and people, and where nothing was ever quite as it seemed. At night, I could hear whispers again, those soft, almost inaudible sounds that never made any sense, yet always seemed so urgent. I would lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to block out the strange noises. But it wasn't just the sounds that unnerved me. It was the sensation of being watched. Every night, I would wake up, the feeling of eyes on me so strong that I would sit up in bed and search the room for signs of life. But there was never anything there. nothing tangible. And then one evening, I walked into my living room and found something that made my blood run cold. On the floor, lying just beyond the couch, was a piece of paper. It was a note, neatly folded and placed with purpose. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. The note was simple, written in black ink, but the words struck me with the force of a sledgehammer. I am watching you, and I will not stop. I stood there, frozen, staring at the note. My thoughts scrambled in every direction, but one question kept screaming in my mind. Who wrote this? There was no indication of who had left it. No signature, no clue at all. But that didn't matter. The message was clear. Someone was watching me. And worse, someone had been in my apartment when I wasn't there. I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this, feeling trapped between worlds, haunted by something I couldn't understand. I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening to me. So I began to look for clues, to try to understand what had happened during my time away. I visited the hospital, hoping to find anything, any record, any document that could explain the gaps in my memory. But the more I searched, the more confused I became. There was nothing. No mention of my accident beyond the bare minimum. Just records of my stay, medical charts, prescriptions. Nothing that could explain the strange events I had experienced. The more I dug, the more it became clear. I wasn't just a man who had survived an accident. I wasn't just someone who had come back from the dead. Something had changed during my time away. And whatever that change was, it wasn't something I could reverse. I had returned from the other side, but I didn't return alone. I've been searching for the truth, but the more I find, the further it slips away from me. The days following the discovery of the note were a blur of fear, confusion, and frustration. The message left for me, "I am watching you, and I will not stop," kept echoing in my mind. It was clear that something or someone had been monitoring my every move since my return. I wasn't just grappling with the fear of what I had experienced, but with the unsettling reality that I was being hunted, observed by something far beyond my understanding. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about me. It wasn't about the car accident or my near-death experience. There was something bigger at play, something I hadn't fully grasped yet. But as I pieced together my fragmented memories, a pattern began to emerge. It started with the dreams. At first, I thought they were just that, dreams. But then they became more vivid, more real. Each night I was transported to the same strange place. A hallway, long and dark, with walls covered in cryptic symbols that I couldn't decipher. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and I could feel something moving just out of sight, just beyond my reach. It was as though I wasn't meant to be there, as though I was trespassing in a world that wasn't mine. In one dream, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was me, but not me. This version of me was different. It had the same face, the same eyes, but there was something wrong about it. It didn't move the way I did. Its actions too precise, too deliberate. It stood there watching me, waiting for something. And then the whispering started again. "You are not the same. You have returned, but not alone." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The words echoed in my ears, and the feeling of being watched intensified. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to figure out what was happening to me. I had to uncover the truth before it consumed me entirely. I started digging deeper, tracing the few leads I had. I contacted the hospital again, hoping to find anything in the records that would explain my time away. But the more I inquired, the more resistance I faced. The staff seemed evasive. their answers curt. It was as if they were hiding something from me. Each time I returned to the hospital, it felt more like I was an intruder in my own life. Frustrated, I turned to the only person who might have some answers, Dr. Rebecca Lane. She was the one person who had mentioned something about near-death experiences and the anomalies that sometimes came with them. She had told me that I wasn't the first person to experience strange occurrences after being brought back from the brink of death. And something told me she knew more than she was letting on. When I contacted her, she agreed to meet. We sat in a small, dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with the smell of coffee, and the hum of quiet conversation filled the space. But Dr. Lane didn't speak right away. She studied me for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust me with what she knew. "You've been through something," she said finally, her voice low, something beyond the normal realm of experience. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I've seen cases like yours before. People who've been changed after an NDE. I leaned forward, eager for any information she could provide. "What do you mean? Changed how?" She hesitated, glancing around the room before leaning in closer. "You didn't just come back from death, Ethan. You slipped through time." My heart skipped a beat. Time? Slipped through time? It didn't make sense. "What are you talking about? That doesn't sound possible." Dr. Lane's expression softened, and she spoke in a way that made me feel like she was revealing something deeply personal. "There are theories, you see. People who experience near-death experiences often report things that don't fit into our understanding of reality. Some describe seeing the future. Others speak of traveling through different timelines, alternate realities. What you've experienced isn't unique, but it's rare." I sat back, trying to process her words. I wasn't sure if I was more confused or terrified. "So, you're saying I've traveled through time?" She nodded slowly. "Not in the traditional sense, but your experience was a crossing, Ethan. You didn't just die. You crossed into something else, something beyond our world. And when you came back, things weren't quite the same." The weight of her words sank in. If what she was saying was true, then everything I had experienced, everything I had felt, wasn't just a product of trauma. It was the result of something far more complex. I had crossed into another time, another reality, and now I was trapped between worlds. I stared at her, my mind racing with questions. How do I fix it? How do I go back to where I was? Dr. Lane shook her head. "I don't know, Ethan. Once you've crossed, it's nearly impossible to return. What's done is done. You've changed the fabric of time, and there's no undoing it." I felt a cold rush of panic course through me. So what now? I'm stuck in this new reality? What happens to me? She looked at me with sympathy in her eyes. "I don't know. But one thing is certain, someone is watching you. Someone or something that has been waiting for you to return. And they don't intend to let you go easily." As Dr. Lane's words settled over me, I realized something even more terrifying. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. And whatever had followed me back from the other side wasn't going to stop until it had me. I thought I was finally ready to face the truth, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found. I couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Lane's words. I had crossed into something beyond my understanding, something that existed outside of time. And now, whatever had followed me back was growing closer, its presence more palpable with each passing day. It was like the air itself had thickened, the weight of something ancient and unknowable pressing down on me. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I stepped into a room, I'd feel that familiar coldness, that sensation of someone or something standing just behind me. I kept seeing shadows move in the corners of my vision, flickers of movement that I couldn't explain. And every night as I lay in bed, the whispering grew louder, more urgent. I had tried to tell myself that I was imagining things, that it was just the stress, the trauma of what I had gone through. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something had changed. Something had followed me back from the other side, and it wasn't going away. One evening, after another restless night, I decided to confront the truth head-on. I couldn't keep running from it, couldn't keep hiding in the dark corners of my mind. I had to face whatever was waiting for me, whatever had followed me back from the other side. I had to know what it wanted. I walked through my apartment, checking every room, every corner. The place felt different now. I could feel the weight of it in the air, the tension building with each passing second. I knew that whatever was coming wasn't far behind. I reached the hallway, where the strange occurrences had been the most intense. The shadows, the whispers, the figure in the reflection. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. And then it happened. It appeared. It wasn't a flash of light or some surreal apparition. No, it was much more subtle than that. It was in the reflection of the hallway mirror. There, standing behind me, was a figure. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. Its eyes were empty, black voids, and it moved with a slow, deliberate motion, mimicking my every action. But there was something about it that felt wrong. I turned. My breath caught in my throat. But when I looked away from the mirror, the figure was gone. I knew then that I wasn't the only one in this reality. The other me, the one with the black eyes, was here, and it was watching me, waiting for the right moment to make its move. I ran to the window, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. But it was no use. Every answer I found only raised more questions. What was this thing that had come back with me? What was its purpose? Then I saw it. In the reflection of the window, just beyond my shoulder, I could see the figure once more. It wasn't in the mirror now. It was standing right behind me, as real as I was. I spun around, my heart nearly leaping from my chest. But again, there was nothing but the empty room. I began to feel dizzy, my vision blurring as a sudden headache struck. I stumbled backward, my hand gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. The dizziness grew worse until the world around me seemed to tilt and shift. I tried to focus, tried to steady my breath, but everything felt wrong. Then, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't in the same reality I had left. It wasn't just the fact that I had returned from the dead. It was the fact that I had come back to a different reality, a timeline altered, a world where something had gone terribly wrong, and my very existence was the catalyst. I had crossed into a world where nothing was as it should be. And I wasn't alone in this new reality. The other me, the version that had stayed behind, had been waiting for me. It had been watching me, observing every step I took, every move I made. It had been waiting to take over. As I stood there, my body trembling with the realization, the figure in the reflection smiled at me once more. Its grin stretched wider, impossibly wide, and it mouthed something silently. It's my turn now. The room began to spin again, the walls shifting and warping, as though the very fabric of reality was breaking apart. I reached out, grasping for something, anything to hold on to, but nothing made sense anymore. The world around me was dissolving, and the only thing left was the haunting grin of the other me, staring back at me from every reflection, every shadow. I realized too late that there was no way to fix this. No way to return to the world I had left. My presence in this reality had caused something to break, to fracture, and now it was too late to stop it. The last thing I heard was the whisper in my ear, chilling and final. Goodbye, Ethan. This is where you end.